Welcome friends to Broken Narratives. I am your host Jay Firangi, coming to you from the Still City, Hamilton, Ontario. Today on this 13th episode of my COVID-19 series, I will cover COVID-19 vaccine safety data from US, as I have so much information to share regarding COVID-19 vaccine safety profile. I am going to cover this topic in 2 episodes. So today I will just cover VSAFE and VAERS data from US. VSAFE is an app that was used by CDC to monitor COVID-19 vaccine safety. It was deployed in December 2020, and more than 10 million Americans had signed up for this VSAFE app, from which they would get regular check-ins at regular time intervals to let CDC know how they were feeling after receiving their COVID-19 vaccines. And VAERS, Vaccine Adverse Event Reporting System, which has been in place in US since 1980s, but most people don't consider that system reliable. So I will cover how the data was obtained from these two vaccine safety monitoring system, and what data was obtained, what does it say regarding COVID-19 vaccine safety profile, demographic data, different age groups, and different symptoms people were experiencing after receiving the COVID-19 vaccines, and adverse events, all kind of adverse events that people were experiencing. I will cover this in detail. So all of the clips that I have today in this episode are taken from the High Wire, Del Bigtree show, and first couple of clips will give you just an brief overview that how VSAFE data was obtained. CDC did not produce this data on their own. FOIA requests were placed by Informed Consent Action Network, and lawsuits were filed against CDC to release this data. So let's hear how that process went.
But before we get to what we discovered, I just want to talk about the journey, because sometimes the journey is more telling than the information that you actually get. One of the things that your law firm is doing for us is filing Freedom of Information Act requests. For people that are brand new to this, that essentially is the government works for us. In the United States of America, they're our employees. In this case, what was our original Freedom of Information Act request when it came to VSAFE?
Yeah, the request was filed in June 24th, 2021, so quite a while ago.
Yeah.
And the initial request we filed was for all the de-identified information in the VSAFE system.
Okay.
And the first lawsuit was filed on December 28, 2021. You can see Informed Consent Action Network versus the CDC.
Here it is.
It says the federal government has mandated that millions of Americans receive these vaccines. HHS has also been given pharmaceutical companies complete immunity for injuries caused by those products, mandating that millions of Americans inject a product for which they cannot hold the manufacturer liable if the product injures them, demands complete transparency, especially when it comes to releasing the data underlying the product safety. FOIA exists precisely so that the American people can obtain transparency, and in this case, obtain the data which supports the CDC's claims to intensive safety monitoring.
So in June 2021, ICAN had submitted FOIA request to get this information, VSAFE data, and de-identified data. What it means, they will explain later, but in simple terms, nobody's private information, names, age, address, those information were not shared in this de-identified data. And in December 2021, they had to file a lawsuit because CDC did not give VSAFE data when requested by FOIA request. And in this second clip, they will talk about Aaron Siri, who is the lawyer who had submitted this FOIA request and lawsuits against CDC. And Del Victory, host of the show, they will discuss what's in VSAFE data and what is VSAFE app, and second lawsuit that they had to file to obtain this data, de-identified data.
And then it goes on to explain in this paragraph what VSAFE, the smartphone app, is, and we can go.
I'll read it. VSAFE is a smartphone app that allows vaccine recipients to tell CDC about any side effects after getting the COVID-19 vaccine. The purpose of the app is to rapidly characterize the safety profile of COVID-19 vaccines when given outside a clinical trial setting, and to detect and evaluate clinically important adverse events and safety issues that might impact policy or regulatory decisions. Despite the fact that the de-identified data already exists, it is already in the hands of a private company, and the CDC has never objected to its production. The CDC has so far failed to produce it to plaintiff or to the American public. The federal government is thereby not only failing to provide the transparency necessary to earn the American people's trust regarding these vaccines, but it is also failing to comply with FOIA.
The second lawsuit.
Wow, they really made us do this.
And this is the second lawsuit. So this lawsuit now sues on the request you just saw.
To see all the data.
And it says on or before September 30, 2022, CDC will, right, they're being commanded by the court, will produce its first batch of non-exempt records responsive to plaintiff, that's ICANN's, FOIA request, as described more fully in the party status report of August 22nd, 2022.
So there was vaccine mandates. There were vaccine mandates in US, Canada, and all across the world. And from December 2021, people had started losing their jobs if they did not receive one dose of COVID-19 vaccine. But as you just heard, that ICAN, Informed Consent Action Network, had to file multiple FOIA requests, and they sued CDC twice to obtain this data. And this data, COVID-19 vaccine safety data, was made them available in September 2022, and a judge had forced them to release this data. CDC did not just release this data on their own, and they had made this data available to a private company, Oracle, but they were not giving up this data to Americans to analyze the data and see what kind of information was being shared by Americans, who, like, more than 10 million who had signed up for this app. And now let's get into what data was obtained from September 2022. And in this next clip, you will get an overview of like how many people had signed up for this data, when they had signed up for this data, and some details of what kind of information was being collected in VSAFE app.
So as we mentioned earlier, there were 10,108,273 individual users. These are folks that actually signed up and registered to use VSAFE and to provide health check-in.
Okay, when the registry really happened, why do you think this is important? What are we looking at here?
Yeah, so what we see here is the number of new registrants by month.
Okay.
If you go all the way to the bottom left, what you see is on December of 2020, that, if folks might recall, is when the first COVID vaccine was given EUA approval. And with the rollout of it, you saw most of the folks who registered to use VSAFE was in December, January, February, March.
So why, early on, why do you think that matters?
I mean, it seems to be that the number of users, the registering, tracks enthusiasm for the product.
Right.
In the very beginning, in the first few months, there were no mandates. People weren't being compelled to get it.
You weren't going to lose your job if you didn't get it. None of that was happening yet. And we could imagine that they want to see a success. They want to stand there as the superheroes going, follow me, look how good this is working for me. That's important, because if you're going to look to people to sort of report vaccine injuries or issues, you know, some of the argument about this data is like, well, it's just the people that wanted to complain. I mean, this is, you know, you only drew to VSAFE, those that had a problem with the vaccine. No, no, no. You drew the people that were lined up for the Cabbage Patch doll. They couldn't wait to get the vaccine.
So close to 8 to 9 million people had signed up for VSAFE app in first five months of vaccine rollout in US from December to April, May. And many people who dismissed that COVID-19 vaccine was not safe, and there were many adverse reactions from these vaccines, as I have covered that how they were produced in record times, and there were many issues. But how they dismiss VSAFE data, like they say that people who were anti-vaxxers or people who are against vaccine mandates, they were providing this data. But as you just heard, that argument doesn't make sense, because this data is from December 2020 to like beginning of the vaccine rollout, like first 5 months, 6 months and on. But most of the people had signed up were at the beginning of the vaccine rollout. So these were not people who were anti-vaxxers. Anti-vaxxers or people who are against hesitant of taking this vaccine do not sign up or do not line up for COVID-19 vaccines unless and until when the vaccine mandates were imposed, and they had to take the vaccine to keep their jobs or something like that. So you cannot dismiss this data just by saying that it's just people who are against vaccines, they are providing this data. Now let's get into adverse reactions and some details. 7.7% of 10 million people had to go to not hospital, but had needed medical care after taking the vaccines, and let's hear that the details.
The 10 million people in this system, 782,913 checked this box. They checked the box. I went to a doctor. I went to the hospital. I was admitted into the ER after my vaccination. So that number, by the way, is about 7.7%.
It's the number that checked it at least once.
That checked it at least once.
At least once. So about 7.7% of these users, these presumably enthusiastic users of
gung-ho users,
get the vaccine, they reported that they received, and most of the reports came in the first week or so after vaccination, that they needed some type of medical care, seeing a doctor, emergency room, or hospitalization. And you can see here that actually that's how many individual users reported needing medical care. That's how many total reports there were of the need for medical care. Folks who needed medical care that reported it, on average, needed it almost 3 times to get medical care.
They made multiple visits, not just one, oh, I was overreacting, I'm going home. They came back, or went deeper into the medical system. And let's just say this, when we look at also, this is an important field, hospitalizations. This is exactly what the vaccine was supposed to keep you from having to do, right? Under these numbers, Aaron, I think it's safe to say, if we look at 75% of the country of 330, 40 million people, however you want to count that number, 75% is over 200 and something million. Just a round number, roughly 20 million people. This is a snapshot of what happened. It says to us that, should this be accurate, 20 million Americans probably needed medical care after the vaccinations. That's a gigantic number.
So according to VSAFE data, 7.7% of people who used VSAFE and gave their information to CDC how they were feeling after receiving COVID-19 vaccine, 7.7% of them needed medical care after receiving the vaccine. That's a big percentage, and you did not hear about this in mainstream news media. There was only one report by Fox News, the lawyer Aaron Siri, who had appeared on Fox News to convey this data. And now let's see how many people who missed work or school because of receiving COVID-19 vaccine.
Tell me about this, 1.3 million missed work or school. Why do you think that this is important? So now we're over, this swath, over 10%. We're talking, in this case, 1 in 10, right? 1 in 10 are missing work or school.
Yeah. If you add in the next category as well, of
unable to perform normal activities.
Now together, those two categories are 25% of the users, separate and apart from those that needed medical care.
Wow.
So if you take those 25% that were unable to perform normal activities or had to miss work or school, and the 7.7% that needed medical care, you're at over 32% of the users in this captive CDC-created tool that they designed, that they put out, that they said will give us the answers about
will make us
safe,
healthier.
Safe.
A product that will make you healthier and go through this where you're not affected and you won't miss work or miss activities or, by God, go to the hospital.
So this is the data, and what it's saying is clear that COVID-19 vaccines were not safe, as you heard that first like 7.7% needed medical care. They went to doctor, they went to see a doctor. So if vaccines were supposed to keep you out of hospitals, that was not true. And as you just heard, like close to 25% of the people had reported missing work or school. So how does that compare to COVID-19 itself? And as you know, like a COVID-19 was very severe for elderly and people with underlying conditions, and it was nothing for children. There were cases, but they were less significant compared to flu or any other illnesses or accidents that younger age group suffered throughout the year. And now let's see some disturbing data. That this is just overview, not details, but some disturbing data that regarding children under 3. What was the rate of adverse events in this age group?
Under 3 years old, there was a total of 13,963 individuals that were under the age of 3, and of them, we had 3,000 of them that said they were impacted by the vaccine.
They had most of the data by May of 2021.
Yeah.
The first COVID vaccine for children under 3 was not until June, I believe, 18th.
So they knew everything we're just looking at. They knew before they did this to the kids.
Not everything, but a significant proportion.
Okay.
If you could just click down on the required medical care.
That's it. The serious ones going to a doctor or into the hospital.
Right. So,
wow.
See, this is out of the 13,963 infants under 3 years old, babies and infants, 1,900 of them required medical care after this shot, and most of these reports are within days of getting the shot. So these parents were reporting it. That's 7.2%.
And our own series said 1,900, but it's 1,009. But still very high number. Again, 7.2% of the children under 3 who had received COVID-19 vaccine also required medical care after receiving the shots. And there were more adverse events among women compared to men. And let's hear why this difference was there, and this was also known beforehand.
Women, this is women up here across the board. In every race, up here is Caucasian or white, I guess we put it. Women having a much greater response and having more health issues than men.
Yeah, and the fact that they're finding that more women are having issues actually comports with the report that we've received from the FDA that Pfizer submitted them shortly after the vaccine started being used.
All right, we're looking at that report right now in full screen. Okay.
This was another, and again, this is not a report that the FDA just handed over. We had to go to court. We had to, fight to obtain this.
Yeah.
And you could see right there, I see it on the screen, that the gender breakdown
Let me pause here just for a second. And as you can see, more adverse reactions in females compared to male. This was data that was submitted by Pfizer to FDA. And let's hear some more details.
For all of these often serious reactions that Pfizer told the FDA happened post use of their COVID vaccine, most of them were in women.
Okay, and a lot of people have had questions that which vaccine is better to take. There were a few options available in every country. So, and which vaccines was good or bad when it comes to adverse events, which one had more or less. So they have some data regarding that as well, and from this next clip.
Yeah. Take us through the fact that one of the important questions is, I keep getting which vaccine's worse than another. We heard a hell of a lot about Johnson & Johnson, yet over there on your side, not a huge part of this, these issues.
In any event, and looking closely at the data, you see here, this is among all 10 million individuals that reported an adverse health impact, right? There's more folks that got Moderna, Fauci shot, for shorthand, because it was developed by the NIH along with Moderna, really. 1.6 million folks, whereas with Pfizer, it was 1.4 million folks. But when you look underneath the hood, there actually were more people that got Pfizer than got Moderna.
So as I have mentioned earlier in previous episodes, that mRNA technology, which was a brand new technology deployed to billions of people around the world, and those two, Moderna and Pfizer, both were mRNA technology, and they had most number of adverse reactions. As you just saw, Moderna had more adverse reaction, I think, per shot compared to Pfizer, but more people had received Pfizer shot. Now let's see severe symptoms, and this is just regarding fatigue. How many people experience fatigue? You heard before that lots of people had missed work or school because receiving of COVID-19 vaccines. So here in this clip you will hear them talk about severe symptoms, but fatigue in particular.
One of the things that we can do is we can click right here, we can look at the symptoms, and here we list this was the questionnaire, basically. Like, this was how it laid out. You're being asked, do you have pain, do you have fatigue, headache, muscle or body ache, joint pain, swelling, chills? Once again, let's just go ahead and just go there. We can say, I want to just look at the severe cases in all of these. We get to see, look at all of that red, 1.1 million having fatigue after the vaccine. You're definitely not going.
So 10 million people had signed up for VSAFE data and VSAFE vaccine safety monitoring system, and out of that 1 million people had reported that they were experiencing severe fatigue after receiving the vaccine, so they could not go to work or school.
Going to work, I don't think if you're feeling that bad, saying I feel severely ill here, muscle, body aches, headache, the list goes all the way down.
So that was regarding severe symptoms, and these were symptoms that were on VSAFE data, that you can just click that I had experienced this kind of symptoms. But there was another box where people can enter information that they want to, like free text data, that people can submit any other information they wanted to submit, and that was not made available with first two lawsuits. And ICAN and the lawyer Aaron Siri and his firm had to submit more lawsuits against CDC to obtain free text data. So let's hear regarding that lawsuits and why this free text data from VSAFE app is very important.
Well, I'm very pleased to report that a federal judge in an incredible 29-page decision has now issued an order requiring the CDC to make every single one of those 7.8 million free text entries available to the public over the next 12 months. Every month they have to produce a few 100,000 of them. There's a schedule on the last page of the order. And, this is a huge win for transparency. It'll be an incredible opportunity to actually see what was being told to the CDC by the public.
I think we have an excerpt right from
telling.
this case, just a statement by the judge. Notably, plaintiff points to several studies published and presented by CDC that rely upon the VSAFE data. All but one of these studies considered only the first 7 days after receiving a vaccine, and the only study that looked beyond the first week considered just 2 weeks. Defendants do not contest this. Rather, defendants dismiss the limited scope of the published studies as just the time period that some scientists have chosen to use in their research studies. I mean, this is amazing, right? What the judge is saying, are you telling me that the CDC has all this data and the only thing you've looked at is the first 2 weeks, when the entire question with an emergency use authorization is what about the long-term side effects? What about 2 years down the road? What about 6 months?
So CDC had published close to 40 articles or papers, scientific papers, using VSAFE data and showing that COVID-19 vaccines are safe. There are not that many adverse events, but they were not releasing the all the data from VSAFE. So as I have covered so far, that so many lawsuits and FOIA requests were submitted by ICAN to receive this data, and the symptoms that were presented in VSAFE, that you can just mark that I had redness around the injection site or fatigue or any other symptoms, but also the free text data that people can give more information how they were feeling after vaccination, that was received later on. And from that data we can we now know that what kind of more severe adverse events were experienced by many VSAFE app users. And in this next clip you will hear regarding adverse events of special interest, which were known by CDC and Pfizer before, but they did not put it in VSAFE data just to mark them off, for people to just mark them off that I had chest pain or any severe conditions or stomach pain, GIT issues, those kind of more severe symptoms were not just given for people to mark. And let's hear when they knew regarding adverse events of special interest.
All of the issues that we and now know are concerning from the COVID-19 vaccines, they well knew that those were issues of concern before the first vaccine was rolled out in December of 2020. The reason we know that is because we have a copy of the VSAFE protocol. That is the 50-page document that the CDC used to design VSAFE, as far as we're aware. And on the last page of that protocol, it lists, as you can see on your screen there, the adverse events of special interest, pre-specified medical conditions. And on that list are the very issues that we now know the vaccine can cause, like myocarditis, pericarditis. On the list also is transverse myelitis, stroke, blood clotting, anaphylaxis, Guillain-Barré syndrome.
So let me just pause and reiterate what they were saying. So they knew, CDC, FDA, they knew since November 2020 that these are the kind of adverse events of special interest are going to be there. People going to experience this kind of severe adverse events, but they did not put these events in VSAFE data. And as you can see on the right, on the app, they had pain, redness, swelling, itching, and chills, headache, joint pain, muscle or body aches, fatigue or tiredness, nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, abdominal pain, and those kind of things. But here on the left, in the adverse event of special interest section, as you can just see, there are acute myocardial infarction, so basically heart attack, anaphylaxis, coagulopathy, blood clotting, those kind of issues, COVID-19. So fourth, or you can say, fourth adverse event, leading adverse events of receiving COVID-19 vaccine was getting COVID-19 itself. Death, Guillain-Barré syndrome, Kawasaki disease, multi-system inflammatory syndrome in children, multi-system inflammatory syndrome in adults, myocarditis, pericarditis. So these are more severe symptoms that they knew were of a special interest, but they did not put this information in a VSAFE app. Let's continue.
Yeah.
A whole host of it. The list is right there on the screen.
Look at the date, everyone. That's November 19th of 2020.
Instead, what they put in the app, as you could as everybody just saw, are the symptoms that the CDC will tell you are totally normal to occur, especially in the first week after vaccination. They actually call that reactogenicity. They say that those are good to have. That means the vaccine's working. And in fact, 30, 40, 50, 60% of the VSAFE users reported one or more of those symptoms. And the CDC published studies going, oh, wonderful, the vaccine's working.
Yes, and another thing that all those 40 papers, scientific papers that were published by FDA, CDC to show that COVID-19 vaccines were safe, they used only first week of data, and a couple of only few of those scientific papers, studies used 2 weeks data, first 2 weeks data. So that is also concerning, because even in the trial they had monitored people who had signed up for trials for I think 2 months. That's it. And then after that, US and every country had started giving these vaccines to millions and millions of people, and that data, they were just using 1 or 2 weeks of safety monitoring data to publish and show that COVID-19 vaccines were safe. But as you can see now, that it was not true. And let's hear some details now regarding when first batch of VSAFE free text data was made available to ICAN and for public to go through.
One user wrote, anaphylaxis within 10 minutes of being vaccinated, throat swollen, almost shut. Another, after receiving the shot, within 15 minutes, I had an allergic reaction, tightening of the throat, dizziness, confusion, elevated heart rate, and was taken to the ER, received steroid shot, Benadryl shot, and epinephrine. Was released to go home. The user later wrote, feeling of mild allergic reaction in the throat, elevated heart rate. One user described their experience at the ER, stating 3 to 5 days after my shot, I experienced a rash around my eye that was painful and burning. I reported to the emergency room on Thursday, 12/24, diagnosed with shingles, herpes zoster, which I've never had before, so I'm suspicious if that could have been a result of my first dose of the COVID vaccine. 22 users reported having a miscarriage that coincided with receiving the vaccine. One such user wrote, I had a miscarriage. I should have been 8 weeks pregnant, but the baby stopped growing at 6 weeks, which would have been very close to when I received my vaccine. Making numerous entries, the user wrote, I had some mild tachycardia 10 minutes after injection. Hard to take a deep breath, sweating, and I turned bright red. My work had me take some Benadryl. I lost the use of my right arm and couldn't lift it. I've had COVID twice, and the night I've had, meaning this night, made me long for COVID-19. This was much worse. I'm not sure I can go through this again for a second shot. I want to do my part, but this was unreal. Anyone around me actually told me not to get the second shot. It felt like death had entered my bones as if they were being hammered. I kept waking up crying with a respiration rate in the 60s. I couldn't take deep breaths because my ribs were hurting. I have a very high tolerance for pain, and this had me in tears.
And since that first batch of data, they have released, CDC has released multiple sets of data, and here, this is the website ICAN Informed Consent Action Network VSAFE data. They have a dashboard that they were using. Here you can see it's an interactive dashboard. You can click on different things, and if you want to check out, please, you can see all the data. They have made it available, and here is also you have raw data. This is like 5th interim release. This is free text data they have been releasing. So if you want to check out what people were saying in their own words to CDC after receiving COVID-19 vaccines, what kind of symptoms they were receiving, how many times they had to go to doctor, urgent care, those kind of things, you can do that on this website, and as always I will provide link to this website as well. Now let's go to VARES, and as I mentioned that VARES has been in place since 1980s in US, but that data is not considered that reliable, and I have a couple of clips regarding that, like in this first clip, it's regarding Harvard Medical School that had conducted a study to see how accurate VAERS data is. Not how accurate, but how much information is collected by VAERS. And there are many reports submitted, like close to 50,000 reports were being submitted in VAERS every year by people who were injured by drugs, pharmaceutical drugs, and vaccines as well. And was VAERS covering or collecting all the adverse events from these pharmaceutical products or not? Harvard had conducted study, and let's see what they had found in 2010.
Remember, CDC reaches out to Harvard Medical School. They say, we are trying to figure out how successful VAERS is. How efficient is it at capturing all of the vaccine injuries that are out there? So they use their own Harvard Pilgrim medical system. And they analyzed that, the amount of injuries coming in. They did surveys. And so this is what they wrote in their report. This is their report. This is the Electronic Support for Public Health Vaccine Adverse Event Reporting System. All right, this is what they said. Adverse events from drugs and vaccines are common, but underreported. Although 25% of ambulatory patients experience an adverse drug event, less than 0.3% of all adverse drug events and 1 to 13% of serious events are reported to the Food and Drug Administration. Preliminary data were collected. They're describing how they did the study from June 2006 through October 2009 on 715,000 patients and 1.4 million doses of 45 different vaccines. They were given to 376,452 individuals. Of these doses, 35,570 possible reactions, 2.6% of the vaccinations, and about 10% of the people were identified. Okay? So likewise, then this was the disturbing conclusion. Fewer than 1% of vaccine adverse events are being reported.
So VAERS data was only collecting fewer than 1% of all adverse events from vaccines and pharmaceutical drugs. So when the COVID-19 pandemic happened, so CDC failed to develop a vaccine safety monitoring system like which was in place, where they failed to improve it. And Harvard Medical School, they had offered to develop a new system. They had developed a new system, and they had reached out to FDA so that they could capture, they could make the data collection, adverse events data collection automated, so more data and all data could be gathered in VAERS system. But FDA did not reach out to Harvard Medical School, and that thing didn't go forward. And here is reporting on that. and also reporting on CDC failing to develop vaccine safety monitoring system by New York Times.
Now, they developed the system, and what they set out to do, and the reason they were doing this study was they were asked, would there be a way to sort of create a monitoring system, an automated system? We were able to automate our Harvard Pilgrim system, and just like you'd asked us, we're ready to automate the entire system across the country so that we can really start collecting far more robust data and getting on top of vaccine injuries, so maybe we can learn some things and perhaps make this product safer. But when you read the end of that report, it's the most terrifying paragraph I've ever read, and this is what it says. Unfortunately, there was never an opportunity to perform system performance assessments because the necessary CDC contacts were no longer available, and the CDC consultants responsible for receiving data were no longer responsive to our multiple requests to proceed with testing and evaluation, basically, of our automated monitoring system. This is the New York Times. As millions get shots, FDA struggles to get safety monitoring system running. For now, the much touted system the government designed to monitor any dangerous reactions won't be capable of analyzing safety data for weeks or months, according to numerous federal health officials. For now, federal regulators are counting on a patchwork of existing programs that they acknowledge are inadequate because of small sample size, missing critical data, or other problems. In interviews, FDA officials acknowledge that a promised monitoring system known as BEST, some brand new one, which we could have had back in 2010, is still in its developmental stages. They expect it to start analyzing vaccine safety data sometime soon, but likely not until after the Biden administration reaches its goal of vaccinating 100 million people.
So that was that, and but we have some secondary information on VAERS that we had obtained, not we, but ICAN had obtained, and they were reported on Del Bigtree show. So CDC had contracted with General Dynamics and an IT company to help them with help CDC with vaccine adverse events monitoring system, VAERS system, at the beginning of the COVID-19 vaccine rollout. So because they knew that somehow they knew that they were going to receive more adverse events reports, so they paid this company, private IT company, General Dynamics, more than $35 million to help them improve their system and gather more information. So we don't have the information the information that they had received, but we have the information from their contracts and their progress reports that GDIT, General Dynamics, had submitted to CDC regarding their work. And let's hear some details regarding that. This first clip is just introduction to CDC's contract with General Dynamics for this work.
Before shots start going into the arms in the United States for the COVID vaccine, that's in December of 2020, we have a contract that was basically given from the CDC to General Dynamics Information Technology. And this was on August 2020. And you can see here, government grants $35.4 million. So they're bringing on a third-party company, an IT company, General Dynamics, to help with VAERS, because apparently they at least know this much, that VAERS by itself, its normal kind of mechanism, is not going to be able to handle what's coming. We have copies of this contract, and it sheds some light on some really interesting data points here. So this is the date of the order. This is the contract with General Dynamics IT, GDIT. That's 8/27/2020. It says here, the purpose of this task order is to provide CDC and FDA technical and programmatic support to collect and analyze information on vaccine adverse events, VAEs, after administration of SARS-CoV-2 vaccines and facilitate reporting to VAERS. So they're going to help. Now, to give a little background here, And they say from 2014 to 2018, VAERS received an annual average of 53,000 reports, of which 45,500 were U.S. reports. Of the U.S. reports, 5% were classified as serious. So in ink, this contract says this. It's the description of work for which they're getting $35 million for. It says the contractor shall implement a staffing and operations plan focusing only on vaccine adverse events, reports after SARS-CoV-2 vaccines. The total number of reports received during periods of peak activity, which are not expected to reflect sustained activity, is expected to be 1,000 reports per day, with up to 40% of the reports serious in nature.
Wow.
So let's hold on a second here. They're expecting basically about almost 700% more reports during this time for COVID. And they said only 5% beforehand, from 2014 to 2018, only 5% were serious. We're expecting about 40%. So what did they know?
So yes, in this contract was signed in August 2020. So as you just heard, that period between 2014 and 2018, they were receiving like 54,000 reports every year, each year, and only 5% of those adverse event reports were serious. But in this, because why they had to hire General Dynamics to help them with VAERS data, because they were expecting 1,000 adverse events reports every day during the pandemic, after rollout of COVID-19 vaccines, and they were expecting 40% of those adverse events to be in serious category. So why would they do that? Like, why would they expect more adverse events reports and more serious adverse events reports? And so they must have known that this is going to happen, and how they knew and why they did not report on this in news media or to public in general. And I have two clips of their progress reports. Let's hear first couple of progress reports that were submitted by GDIT to CDC.
So let's go back to their progress report. We have their progress report from the start of December, the first vaccines, to January. And it says here, they tell the CDC this: 2 vaccines have been released since the last report. Since release, the number of incoming COVID-19 reports has significantly exceeded the estimated maximum of 1,000 reports per day, per the chart below. Now look at this chart that they included to the CDC leadership that the public has never seen before. There's the red line. There's 1,000 reports that they prepared for. And if you look,
which is 700% higher than it usually was for VAERS.
Their high watermark turned out to be a low watermark. And it took less than 1 week, if you look at the beginning there, 12/15/2020, less than 1 week to break their worst case scenario of 1,000 per day. And off it goes, basically a straight line if you draw it all the way up to the middle of January.
Wow.
So they have a problem. Their contract kicks off and they can't even fulfill the requests during the first 5 days. So this is a problem. And now we go to the next report, the next progress report. The first, basically January 2021, that month, and it says there continues to be record-setting metrics in multiple categories, including number of incoming reports, over 76,000, number of web reports, over 54,000, number of website visits, over 1.5 million, number of inquiries from the public, this phone calls, emails, over 14,000. So they're getting inundated on all fronts here.
And this was in January 2021. They were receiving this many reports and inquiries from US citizens who were experiencing adverse events, adverse reaction from COVID-19 vaccines. And people still dismiss this information, saying that these are people who just don't like vaccines, who are anti-vaxxers. But people who signed up for VSAFE data, or people who were getting vaccines at the beginning of vaccine rollout, were not the people who are against vaccines. And let's hear more details from their progress reports to CDC, GDIT's progress reports on their data collection of adverse reactions on VAERS data.
So what did they suggest? They suggest these IT activities. Expand the VAERS ID in all 6 extracts to support a 7-digit field. So instead of 6 numbers, now they have to go to 7 numbers to account for all the people coming in. Update the COVID Excel sheet deliverables application to include additional symptom codes. So they had a list of symptoms, but they weren't enough because more symptoms are coming in. So they had to update the symptom codes to account for this in their Excel spreadsheets. Now, just those 2, that's the first 2 months now of these reports coming in, completely inundated, adding extra numbers, updating symptoms. They got a problem. Now let's look at mid-February into March now. And so let's check this one out. There continues to be record-setting metrics in multiple categories. So nothing changed there, still just shooting through the roof. They say, although staff processed over 40,000 reports in February, a record high, by the way, they are unable to keep up with the increased surge in reports at current staffing levels. Let's go from basically March into April, from the General Dynamics report to the CDC leadership. And they say this, again, they're seeing these metrics, they're showing these metrics, and you notice at the end of each one, increased from February 2021, that was the last report, increased from February 2021. So almost 2 million website visits. The number of incoming reports are now almost 100,000. They're getting about almost double what they're getting as inquiries from the public, all increased. So what do they say? They say this, while staff processed over 60,200 reports in March, another record high, they were unable to keep up with the increased surge in reports.
So previously, between time period of 2014 and 2018, that was the baseline. They were saying like 50,000 reports per year, and now in a month they were receiving 60,000, 40,000 reports, and all kind of requests and queries from people and website visits. So this was the data that we have received from US, but VAERS is still, like, many people dismiss it because it's like self-reporting. Patients can report by themselves, or medical officer or doctor, nurse, they can also submit VAERS data. But as it says that people can submit their adverse events on their own, many people dismiss this data because it's less reliable. That's the argument. But I will also cover why that argument also doesn't hold in the next episode. This was just from US. We have confirmation and from other governments like Australia. They have produced reports and they have accepted that people have been injured by COVID-19 vaccines. Japan, they have also accepted that people have been injured by COVID-19 vaccines, and I think one of the high-profile medical officer in Japan or politician also apologized in public in front of protesters who are people who are protesting against COVID-19 vaccines like within last 6 months or so. So I will try to cover those data points in the next episode. This was all technical information. In the next episode, most likely I will cover testimonies from doctors and nurses and their experience, and also testimonies from people who were injured by COVID-19 vaccines and what kind of symptoms and how bad it was, and for how long they were suffering from those adverse events. So there have been many documentaries released regarding COVID-19 vaccine adverse events, and there are few from US, also from UK. Many countries, they have their own documentaries, people who have been injured and who had to help each other because there were no help from governments around the world. They, apart from Australia and maybe Japan, most of the countries have, and governments of the countries have ignored these people who have suffered injuries, adverse events from these COVID-19 vaccines, which were experimental and were not tested for safety, long-term safety particularly. So I will cover that data in the next episode. So For today's episode, just quickly summarize, like VSAFE data shows that at least 7.7% of the people had to receive medical attention after receiving the COVID-19 vaccine. 25 to 30% were missing school or college, or were not able to perform activities, routine activities, and serious side effects were known by FDA and Pfizer, but they did not make it easier for people to report on this data, and US government did not produce this data for people to make informed decision regarding COVID-19 vaccines. ICAN and other law firms had to submit FOIA requests and file lawsuits against CDC and FDA to receive this data, and because they had to hide the safety profile of COVID-19 vaccines. So this brings me to the end of this episode. I hope the information I have shared was eye-opening, and you would come back for the last episode of COVID-19 series and hear from people who worked in medical industry to hear their testimonies and see how they were harmed by COVID-19 vaccines. So thank you very much for listening to Broken Narratives or watching to Broken Narratives. You can find my show on Odyssey, Rumble, YouTube, BitChute, Podbean, and any other new podcasting app. And I hope you share with your friends, family, colleagues to help me spread the word. And I will see you in the next episode. I am your host, Jay Firangi, coming to you from the Still City, Hamilton, Ontario.